This video is brought to you by Wicket Cricket Manager. Can I get your name and job title, please?
Justin Geale. I'm the VP of Cricket, American Cricket Enterprises, or Major League Cricket as it's known now.
How does a random Aussie bloke end up running a T20 league in the middle of Texas and Carolina and North Carolina? Whichever Carolina it was. One of the Carolinas.
One of the liners.
Yeah. How did all this happen?
Yeah, luck, chance, fate, I don't know. I was at IPL for, I think, 8, 9, 10 years and loved that experience. It's quite unique in world sport.
You were general manager of that league? Is that your title?
I got confused. I started as a venue manager back in Pune in 2012. I had no inclination to go to India in my life. I'd never been there. Didn't really rate T20 cricket, if I'm honest, and was sceptical about the BCCI. So all these things ended up in me needing a job and it coming about through luck and fate, and ended up there. And then enjoyed the ride. I think by the end of it, I was, I'll call it GM of cricket ops or something like that for BCCI. I'm sorry, in terms of IPL, IMG, but we sat in the BCCI office, so effectively their team. And yeah, there's many podcasts on some of the stuff that happened there and some of the journeys we had from. Yeah, I won't even go there. But yeah, no, ended up there, and then I thought it's time to. The trouble about being in a cricket bubble and event is sometimes you're not a great son or partner or friend, and it's all consuming. So I thought it was time to sort of get off the roller coaster for a bit. Did that and moved to Dubai to set up a bit of consultancy, and then at that time, my partner, her contract was cut short. She's American. At that time, we thought, well, why not? Let's go to America and see what we can do. And I didn't really come here to do cricket, as it were. I really thought it was a chance for a reset to try and get into another sport, another country, time for something new. And the timing just worked. It was pre-COVID, and I came across a gentleman called Samir Mehta, who is a founder, one of the founders of our company, and Ian Higgins from the ICC, ex-ICC, who was the CEO of USA Cricket at the time, and had dinner with them in New York, and it was really quite surreal again. It was this Aussie guy with an Englishman and an American Indian talking about their plans in cricket, and I thought it was ridiculous, some of the stuff they were saying and the ambition, and I sort of agreed and thought, I'd work for a while, probably time. And took the job, and that was nearly 4 years ago, and the rest is history, I guess.
How different was that first idea over, I'm going to assume, steak and lobster and whiskey, compared to what finally kind of happens?
I think it was Korean, actually.
Okay. Barbecue.
How different? Yeah, I think the dream, the vision was the same. I think the way we got there, not so much. I think, I think my expectations probably were tempered pretty quick. It felt like we'd talk about Major League Cricket. At the end of it, Samir said, you just need to launch a 28-team, national minor league first of all, as a throwaway line. I was like, that sounds like a lot of work, guys. But yeah, no, I was really excited. There's so many false starts of cricket in this country. It's pretty well documented. You don't have to Google too far to see some of the failures and challenges here. But I did think, coming from my experience in cricket and also working in different cultures around the world, that I'd be a pretty good fit. I think the time felt right in terms of what these guys were saying, in terms of the investment coming into the sport, but also with USA Cricket sort of aligning. I thought it felt right at the time. So yeah, it was a long way from that conversation to now, but the vision certainly hasn't changed.
It's interesting because you talk about Ian Higgins, and obviously at one stage he might have been the most sued man in cricket. Every time, I think if you Google his name in lawsuit, he's probably got more lawsuits than Sachin does international hundreds. But he leaves in 2021. I remember talking to Neil Maxwell, who was kind of the Justin Geale, although slightly better cricketer than you, but of his day.
He's a better businessman as well, actually, to be honest with you.
Yeah, he's done very well for himself. But he's Pat Cummins' agent, I think, still, isn't he? Yes, he is, because I talked to him the other day. But, I remember when he went over, he was like full of all this, Jarrod, you don't understand what we're going to be able to do in America. And then you get there and you realize that, American cricket is in such a complicated place. And then America is such a complicating place in general, regulations and all this sort of stuff. I remember talking to you really, really early on, and you had this incredible energy, but you're a little bit like, oh, it's going to be difficult, but I'll be fine. Then I talked to you a little bit afterwards, and there was no blood left in your face as you spoke to me. It got tough, right? The complications really got to you in a way that you were used to complications in the IPL, and you've worked with other cricket boards and cricket places before as well. It's its own world, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's levels to everything, and nothing's quite simple. And I did, working in cricket in India, and it's in many ways the pinnacle of the sport, just in terms of the scale and the exposure, and how serious it is, and and the press. So, we'll never escape cricket and politics. They go hand in hand, unfortunately. But coming out of that environment, the BCCI, I thought, I've got this. I can handle most things. I've seen it all. And it took me about 6 months to realise that actually it's worse here. And it's worse in so many different parts of the country in different ways. So it's really complex, and it's been a roller coaster. I wouldn't say it's been smooth sailing, this job. I think it's by far the hardest thing I've ever done professionally. Which is great. I tell our team often, character building, and when you get through and look back, you've actually been able to build something. Not everyone can say they've done that. I think that's the really enjoyable thing, as opposed to an IPL. It very much is, I won't say plug and play, because it's very big, but we're quite formulaic now. You know what you're doing. We know how to run a big event. And it's, in terms of evolving it, you're trying to do a little bit each year rather than, from scratch. Whereas here we had an absolute blank canvas, which is... incredibly challenging, but also scary. And a lot of the complications come from just, you say, cricket wasn't built to be played in this country. It just, probably was originally, but we lost its way there sometime back at a federation. And infrastructure is probably our biggest challenge. That's expensive. I think there's so many passionate cricket people here, but when you try to get serious about high performance or growing something to a scale, there is a real lack of experience, and trying to change things that have worked really successfully at a local league and continue to, trying to change that isn't easy. We have, one of the beautiful things about America is, built on immigrants. For goodness sake, I'm here, and I've been here 4 years now, and it's my adopted country, and I embrace, all the goodness and the badness about it. Let's not gloss over. It's not perfect, but I think there's so many, from a multicultural perspective, we have so many different backgrounds, be that an Indian or Pakistani or Afghani and Australian. On the other coast, where I am, we've got the West Indian population. There's a huge Sri Lankan population, and of course, expats, South Africans and English. So it's a very diverse melting pot of cricket, as you will. And generally harmonious, but there is also lots of different pockets within, certain areas. So trying to get everyone to move in the same direction is tough sometimes, and that's probably one of the bigger challenges. We've got a governing body who is an associate nation, so funding has always been, tough. It's really tough out there if you're an associate. When you've got a country this size, it's incredibly hard. So there's all these layers, and then we come from a different perspective where, it is a startup environment, which is not unique in sport. It's the way things are going. This corporate, and sport sort of funding. So we come from a different mentality, and that was new for me as well, trying to change to this. Well, we sort of do it this way in cricket, and it works pretty well everywhere else, so it should work that way here, and being told that's not going to work here, and find a solution. So, so it's, the short answer is there's lots of layers. It's been an absolute roller coaster, zero regrets. I'm really proud of what we've achieved, and still really excited about the scale. I think one of the best things for me about Major League is, in a way, it's a pretty expensive and stressful proof of concept. Well, I thought it would work. You plan these things. When they actually do, you can sit back and go, wow, we were right. But I think we've scratched the surface, to be honest.
I mean, it's interesting. The whole associate thing is fascinating. I remember when Hong Kong got good, the players in Hong Kong, like the amateur players who were never going to play for the national team, almost resented the fact that the team got good because they didn't get access to facilities and everything else. And again, I've heard similar things in America of, we now don't have access to some of the nicer grounds and everything else. And then, as someone who did some analysis on your minor leagues, it's incredible to see. It's like 1930s English cricket, where you've got guys who are literally putting themselves in the team because they own a team, and then you've got they might be the opposition might have this incredible young batter from out of absolutely nowhere, like quality disparity is just mad. I mean, and it's such a big place, as you said.
Yeah, it is. And then how do you try and, again, we talk about layers. Like, so what's the pathway? How do we get USA cricket stronger and constantly competitive? Because I believe we can be, no doubt about that. How do we keep the ecosystem that's working to a degree where these local leagues survive? Because ultimately, cricket, is successful in this country because of all the volunteers and local leagues. They've had to be, they're passionate about cricket, they love cricket, and they put their own time, their own money into it. So, with that brings all sorts of different, challenges as well. But then how do we try and get the best players playing against the best players? How do we get them good practice facilities? How do we get them good coaching? And that's, really hard when it's such a big, disjointed country. And the governing body, traditionally hasn't had a lot of money.
The other thing is that America is, I suppose in some ways, being an Australian and having worked in India, you get this, but there's a kind of uber patriotic sort of style that comes through those three different countries. So you were quite well set up to understand this, but you're a foreigner with a foreign sport, even as we've talked about, cricket was obviously in America for a very long time. George Washington played cricket, fun fact. So you're a foreigner with a foreign sport going out and having to have all these discussions. And then on top of that, one of the first big things that we know about Major League Cricket is Corey Anderson and Liam Plunkett and Dane Peets and all these, Rusty and all these random guys that we all kind of know the names of, in some cases very famous, in some cases, we can kind of remember them. It's a weird thing to bring all those in. Why was that the decision? Is it just because there wasn't enough institutional knowledge of cricket within America at that time?
Yeah, and I think this is it's a pretty it's a sensitive topic here in America at the moment, rightly so. What makes a domestic player? And that goes, for me as well. What makes me any better than someone's been here to come and run a league? I think there's a degree of experience about that. I think it is a very patriotic nation. You're right. And we now have a national anthem in front of each match of the major league. Something I've never done at a T20 tournament before. So yeah, I think it comes back to the depth of talent. Well, there is some very good cricketers across the country. They are scattered. They're probably very good within their league. It's a challenging one too, because what are you playing on? Are you playing on a good turf? Are you on a confident outfield where you can dive and slide? How fast are you generally facing? How quick is that guy coming in? So I think, there's a lot of good cricketers here, great cricketers. That transition from here to here is tough. So I think in terms of Major League Cricket, ultimately long term, we need to be a domestic T20 tournament. And again, this is a very fraught with, many nuances conversation as to what makes a domestic player. How many domestic players do you have in your lineup? And these are things we constantly battle with. But I think we had to start somewhere. And people are sick of me saying this, but at the end of the day, this needs to be about the cricket fundamentally. Because if the cricket's not good, if it's a shit product, then Americans or Indians, Americans or Sri Lankans who live here aren't going to embrace it. So that was the very philosophy. Is like, how do we get the best possible cricket? So yes, we bring in the best players in the world, but there's 4, 5, 6 of them in a lineup. How then do we balance the rest of it? So I think the relocating of 40 or 50 people over here, and that's been happening over 3.5 years. We get a hard time sometimes, and I get it. These people have landed off the boat and want to play, and they're going to qualify for USA and take the USA players and. It doesn't happen that quickly, If you're coming here, you are packing up your life. You are either bringing a wife, bringing children. You're having children here. You're establishing themselves. You're going through a very hard time, like I did when you move to any new country and learning how things work and understand how all that goes. The guys who have been here from the start, Liam and Corey, everyone's got a different story. They both have American wives, so not just like me. They're here for love, not necessarily their career. If you marry
Rusty
like
was studying, I want to get this right, black literature is why he was in America at the time, right? Rusty Theron, am I right?
100%. And now that guy, one of my favourite things in Major League was seeing him steam in one more time and being in his rightful environment, Rusty. So you look at Rusty. Rusty is a guy who has put heart and soul into cricket in this country. He's one of the best coaches going around, particularly with juniors. He's always got time. I don't know how he's still got a shoulder with the number of throwdowns he has. And Rusty's just had his first child as well. So again, he's really embraced this is his home, and Rusty, is American for all intents and purposes. But having him here does is raise the people around him through coaching, through being able to play with better players, through facing a faster bowler, through having cricket conversations and being around cricket people, which really was lacking. And it took me a couple of years. And even now, when we all get together with the major league players who have played first class and international, you just feel it. And it makes a difference. And that's how we get people better. That's how we get all the domestic players around them better. So the theory was, it was to strengthen, Major League Cricket when it came around. It also came to how can we look at longer term, getting USA Cricket into a stronger place, either by playing or coaching or training, all these sort of things to get that high performance environment. And that was an easier way to do it. So these guys coach in their local academies, they play local cricket, they do all that sort of stuff. They're very much in their ecosystem. It's not like they're just landing here, copying millions and millions of dollars and just playing cricket and swanning about. It doesn't actually work that way here in America.
Minor league, I'm interested. I think you said it was Samir's idea before, and he threw it to you, and you had a panic attack afterwards, which is fair enough. I've always said that. I think that's a big problem with new cricket nations, as much as anything, is that they start getting very good, but there isn't really a structure. So if you look at the Netherlands, for instance, we know that talented cricketers have come through the Netherlands for a very long period of time now, but we also know that when they go back into their club structure, it's just not strong enough, and it isn't there. We've seen Ireland try and combat that, and all these other different things. Minor league it's a fascinating concept because it's how Americans think of sport. That the NBA obviously has a G League. Minor league itself is a term taken from baseball. So these things exist out there, not to mention all the college systems and everything else. But from a financial point of view, you can see why most leagues in the world would never, ever do anything like you have done. Again, is that to try and show that you're actually part of the cricket community in general, or was it just that you thought you had to lift the overall playing standard of the American players?
Yeah, and there's a couple of factors to it. There's no domestic structural pathway here for all the reasons we've discussed: money, size, scale, depth of players, all that sort of stuff. So I'm not for a second saying minor league is perfect and is the answer, but what it gives us is, for a period of time, the best players in theory in each region playing against each other and then playing against other teams. So you're playing, it's a more like for like, if I will. So initially it was also to give the 40 players, 50 players we had coming over, okay, we're going to bring players over here, what are they all going to do? Where do they train? How do we get good cricket? So it was very much part of that. It's a huge tournament. I think it's like last year was 230 games or something like that. Now these are played from anywhere from turf, and we've got a couple of really nice turf grounds, to I'm going to say respectfully, a couple of the go tracks. The outfields are rough. We're sharing baseball grounds, or quite often football, soccer fields here, where the grass is pretty high and the council's only got one blade mower and they won't take it lower for us. So, that's changing. This year, for the first time, we've sort of mandated it's got to be played on turf or a hybrid, which we're trying to bring in. That's been okay. Unfortunately, though, our determination to push that has meant sometimes we're not playing on the best wickets. I think it's okay because we're on that path. I think, honestly, infrastructure is the way this country gets better quicker, and that's expensive. But I think, that's what minor league was about. It was to try and give us a baseline. It was to try and say, okay, there is a form line. Well, if you're performing well in minor league against better players in better conditions, then it stands to reason you're a better player. If you're a junior player coming through, and, we grow up in Australia and the UK is not too different, some of the steepest learning curves you have, or you start to play seniors, you're playing with people who are bigger, tougher, older, stronger than you, and you'll find out then pretty quick if you are that good or if you do have what it takes. So I think it gives us a really good way to bring our juniors into it. And we've tried to mandate, 19s and squads and playing 11s to mix success. And we keep working on that because I think that's really important to give them, again, a pathway. So if you overlay that with what USA's cricket is doing with their zonals and regionals, a lot of people wouldn't know here, but the USA, the market is very different. There's a lot of private tournaments. A lot of it's unregulated. Some of it's ordinary. Some of it's good. There's a lot of money flying around on weekends from private owners that up until minor league, that was sort of how a cricketer would make his money here in the USA. A lot of journeymen would come here and play, and guns for hire on weekends, and really good cricketers, but absolutely beating up the local opposition. Sometimes that's for a photo with the owner or something as silly as that, and play. So I think that sort of coexists still, and I think the quality of those is getting better, and the better operators and the more reliable ones are coming through. I think you overlay that with the minor league into a major league, with the zonals and with the nationals. All of a sudden there is a 12-month program for cricket which hasn't existed, so it gives a bit of structure as well to a season. And yeah, it gives, it's a baseline, I suppose. It's not, you do well in minor league, you're not necessarily the best cricketer in the country, but you're probably better than playing in a local league in Atlanta or New Jersey or just,
Yeah, you talked about that. It sounds like a very good, semi-professional structure, right? But American sports works via colleges more often than not. So is that the hope? Because it's really interesting, because a lot of people compare it to football or soccer. And so soccer basically becomes a sport that parents start to put their kids into because they don't want them to get head injuries as a young player playing American football, right? And then it becomes the soccer driving Volvo mums or whatever they were called, right? Volvo driving soccer, I forget the name of it. Anyway, that becomes a whole thing. Cricket doesn't have the ability to probably be like that because now football's already taken that spot. And so then the other one is, of course, this whole college aspect, right? Of American sports are predicated on college. And I'm saying, I know that there is some cricket played in colleges, but you don't get scholarships and all that sort of stuff to play cricket over there. How do you go to the NCAA? Is it NCAA? I think that's what they call it.
NCAA,
Yeah. Do you go to them and go, hey, you don't know me, but I'm a pretty stand-up guy. I've got this league. Can we start to do this? How does that work? Because it feels like to me that almost has to be. Every time I've talked to people in America, it's the 18 to 22-year-olds that they lose first, right? Because they go to college. If they're good athletes, they play another sport, or they just go to college and get a real job. That's where USA Cricket seems to be missing so many of their players.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're trying to grow any sport in any part of the world. You need, that grassroots as part of it, right? So even before you get to NCAA, what are we doing at a junior level to show people the sport, to get them in? And then if they're any good, you're right, chances are you're going to be playing another sport here in America because, the college system here is very different to the rest of the world, like a lot of things. So yeah, it needs to be a big thing. And we think about it a lot, and this also comes back to the governing body and budget and time. But I think there is a real opportunity now. Cricket, this is the start of momentum. I think Major League Cricket is important for that because it shows you, you can have a career as a cricketer. That hasn't existed before in this country. I can play in my domestic T20 tournament, earn some decent money. That will also put me on the radar to other leagues around the world, particularly through some of our ownership groups. So if I'm good enough, I'll rise through. So I think that's one part of it. I think the scholarship thing is huge. And I think, my personal opinion, I think we could probably do it in female women's cricket a bit quicker. And the sooner we can embrace that. Because if I look at a sport like softball, where these guys are incredibly talented athletes, they're hand-eye, and they can hit a ball. My niece plays, and she's phenomenal. You give her a golf club, and next thing you know, she is there, hasn't played before. So I think, their in terms of a career, when they finish college, that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got my scholarship. I come through. Now what do I do? Whereas actually, if you're playing somewhere like cricket, there is a whole world out there that a lot of these other sports in America can't offer. So I think there's that unique perspective we can do. I think it comes from exposure. I think the World Cup here next year can be really big for the sport as well in terms of, again, exposure. And there's been an awful lot of interest this week on the announcements. I think we look at 28 LA. I think if that comes through, and there's a good chance it will again. These aren't all souls who are going to change the world just like that. But I think this is constantly building what is cricket, Yeah, we sort of know it's big in the rest of the world. We've heard it. It's a bat and ball, right? And I get this every day. Americans are an incredibly sophisticated sports consumer. They have incredibly high expectations. They're incredibly knowledgeable. They're also incredibly curious, more than you would think. And back to your question before, you're a foreigner trying to peddle this foreign sport. I get nothing but really positive questioning, and a lot of it's the same, and I'll say, well, it's 360 degrees, we don't wear a mitt, there's 120 pitches in an innings, and once you start explaining the game and the nuances, there really is curious. So I think it's going to work here. I think the schools are important, and I think it's sharing the game. It's also showing them how big this sport is in the world and how big, whenever we're going to a meeting or an interview or something, this is the second biggest sport in the world. This is the largest sporting media market in the world. Finally, if we can converge these two, and it's getting there, I think this can be big. And I'm not saying we're going to take on MLB or NFL, or we don't need to. This country is huge. There's already a huge existing support for cricket. It's incredible, the fans that came to Major League. And that's without, I say we scratch the surface, that's without bringing a lot of new people into the game. So when we do, they tend to be pretty hooked. If you do it right, you show them a good game, you explain it, I think it's going to work here. And a lot of people have said that before. My only counter to that is no one's got this far. We've built a cricket stadium out of a baseball stadium in Grand Prairie, Texas, which is ridiculous. But it's great. And we filled it for Major League. We didn't help ourselves. We put tickets on sale 3 weeks before. It was 110 degrees. For everyone out there, maths and America are synonymous. I think that's about 43, 44.
It's hot.
We did a lot of things that you shouldn't do. If you've got a textbook to say how to start a league, we did it. So in a long-winded way to get back to your NCAA, I think it's exposure for the sport. I think it's really showing our unique properties about how good a game it is. And I'm biased, and I know you are, because I love this game. It's a high scoring. It's entertaining. It's an event every ball, Not to dig on baseball, because I love baseball as well. I'm a huge Cubs fan now. But this is so much more exciting and high scoring, and Americans love that. So once they start playing the game and seeing that, and seeing there is a pathway, there's a career now, there's a lot of money in this sport, I think that's what's going to turn the NCAA on. There's a lot of viewers in this sport. So once you start talking commercially, which we can start to do now, because we're starting through the back of Major League to have that numbers. I think we had 3 matches on CBS Sports here, a Major League, which is massive. There's no secret that the 100 has changed format to get back to free-to-air TV. For us, that was huge. And, I live in a little town in northwest Indiana called Chesterton, and cricket is not a thing here. But all of a sudden, I've down a couple of times, and they said, "Oh yeah, I saw that. I saw that. The unicorns. What is that? So that sort of exposure is huge, and that translates to schools and scholarships. So I think before we get there, though, we really need to start educating more people about the game before we get to college. Is my long answer.
No, that was great. I just wanted to talk about Morrisville. So I find that a really, really interesting one, because that is one that almost grew organically, right, as a cricket culture. And for those who don't know Morrisville, and there's no reason you would, there's probably about 28 Morrisvilles in America. It's like Springfield, probably.
Springfield,
right?
Shelbyville.
Yeah. I think, it's not a big place. It's obviously between 3 or 4 major university campuses where a lot of subcontinental students and students from around the world, the cricketing world, have ended up in. But that, I remember, for the minor league finals from last year, was it? It must have been, or the year before, whenever that was. There's a real cricket spirit around that has grown up. And how long did that take? And is that something that, is that just, I don't know, is Morrisville just become your Green Bay and you can't really replicate it anywhere else? Or is Morrisville something that you can actually work out how it worked, that you can move it everywhere?
Yeah, I think we can move it everywhere. I think, certainly targeted areas. I think if you look at Morrisville, North Carolina, it's in the Research Triangle. You've got Raleigh, Durham. You've got some massive schools there. If you think Duke, you think NCU and Michael Jordan, and all these schools. So it's probably the quickest growing part of this country, I would have thought, at the moment, in terms of what's going on. It's a really pretty place, lots of trees. It's a lovely place to be. I think, as I said before, and this isn't sexy, infrastructure is the key. And it would not be, a podcast without, a Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come reference, which is corny as hell. But, 2 mayors ago, they had a bit of vision to think, actually, my demographic is changing here. Where are the votes going? How do I, keep appealing to this market? There's a very strong league there called the TCL, the Triangle Cricket League, who do great things, and they play lots of cricket. They had nowhere to play. They still don't have enough places to play. It's a massive league. So I think it came from vision, an acknowledgement that, America is changing in terms of demographic, and these guys play cricket. So they put a field in. It's a public park, and every time we go there, I love going there, but it's incredibly difficult to work there because you can't shut it down. You'll get aunties and uncles walking in the morning and dogs in the afternoon, and it's, so it's that sense of community is really strong. They're a cricket loving community, and we had Major League there. We used it as a venue this year, and I think we sold out every match. It was 3,000, 3,500, 6,000 depending on who you listen to. But it was packed. It's not necessarily built for a scale of Major League, but they just love cricket, and the chance to see their heroes and some of the best players in the world. Rashid Khan, bless him, is an absolute saint. He must have stayed behind and signed 1,000 autographs himself, that one night. And people kept coming, and so I think those populations exist all around the country. You look at someone like Broward County, that again became about as a political decision. Let's build this stadium. There's a lot more of our constituents know this game and love this game. And unfortunately, Indiana had one, I think, and it was probably ahead of its time. And maybe just the wrong area, but they built a beautiful turf facility there. And so a lot of it, back to sport and politics mixing, I think it comes from, strong local cricket existing bases already, lobbying and working with their local politicians to say, we love this game, a lot of your voters love this game, we want someone to play it. And Morrisville was as simple as that. But yeah, it's a pretty unique community. I'd love to pack them up and take them wherever you go, because you're going to get a crowd. But I think they exist, and I'll upset someone here, but definitely in Atlanta, New Jersey, New York, in Chicago, not far from where I am, in all through San Francisco, California. There's these pockets of places where we play cricket.
You got not you personally, but the Major League Cricket got a lot of money. I won't read the exact number out.
Bajillions.
But you got a lot of money early on. A lot of promised money anyway is probably the best way of putting it, but certainly more than the CPL or many other leagues in the world would ever start with. Probably more than the South African league started with, right? And despite the fact that it was in a major country, yet you still got to a couple of days before, and Peter De La Pena was reporting about the stickers still going up, or the chairs being painted or putting in place or whatever. You got a lot of money, but it wasn't easy to get it from that conversation of we're going to, come in and do that to actually getting the product on the field. Is that just because of how complicated cricket is in America? Is it because it was too big a project because it always felt like to me, I don't want to slander any of your great employees, but it feels like you've got about 4 people running around in circles 24 hours a day at times. What was it that made it so hard at the end, despite having the sort of financial resources that most cricket tournaments, let's be honest, are never going to have?
Yeah, and it's fair all what you say. I think, the biggest challenge we have, again, is infrastructure, and stadiums are really expensive, and doing things for the first time are really expensive. If I wanted to go and buy a cricket net or cricket equipment here of a standard, I can't. I'm still trying to get baseball companies to manufacture it. So, in terms of, our actual setup costs and building facilities and investing in things, it's taken an awful lot, and it's going to continue to, which is why we're pretty selective with our owners, because our owners are coming in not just to buy a franchise. Actually, guys, you guys are going to have to buy a stadium here somewhere. And believe me, a bit of land in New York or LA or San Fran, the areas we're looking aren't cheap. So, yeah, it is big money. I think a lot of our investors, in fact, all of them, we've been selling a dream, to be honest. And it's all very good for me to hear or trot out the owners or, how good this game is. But the reality is it takes time to get there, So the ROI, this is not going to be year one. It was always going to be a slower burn. So in terms of that, cash burning all the time, but there's no point in having a league spending all the money and not being here the next year. So I think that's why we do run pretty lean. So it's fair to say I've got a small team. I've got, no one else I'd rather have with me, but Peter De La Pena's there at 3:30 in the morning and we're cleaning up glass that got smashed from a practice session the night before and we're all tired and cranky. It's, not normally you'd see, some of my most senior people, doing that. Our head of legal was firing the t-shirt gun, and I had so many incredibly talented people doing stuff that they're here because they believe in the vision as well. So I think, we've spent money prudently to be honest. I think, our ownership structure is something which is very unique. You are funding the league. Our owners are it's very American style. Owners will own the league ultimately. So that with that comes a different perspective and a responsibility for each of them in terms of funding stadiums, in terms of funding the game here and their obligations. Domestic players, that's a tricky one because domestic players in the rest of the world, and SA is a great example, yeah. SAT 20 came together incredibly late as well, but they also had stadiums ready to go with people who know how to run those stadiums with a crowd who understands cricket. So that was tough enough for them as well, ILT 20 as well. If you layer the fact that we had a brand new stadium, was literally the paint was drying as people were coming in, with all the will in the world, I'd like to think I'm graded. I don't necessarily know the intricacies of running a stadium, let alone a cricket stadium, and trying to explain to our police and security how that works. And so many layers, as I said at the start. So easy to spend money doing that. We're here for the longer term. So I think now, I said proof of concept, we've got that. I think our challenges are big though, because you can only rely on the first time. So now it's like, oh yeah, we saw that last year, you've done that. So what's that? That's new venues. I really think we need to Americanise the game more here and do that in a good way. A lot of people say, oh shit, Americans can't do that. But said it's such a sophisticated consumer, and they do sport so well here. I love it. There is so much. You look, the high school football setup I've got here in this small town is probably rival to any of the universities in Australia that I've seen. It's ridiculous. So I think we need to embrace our American side, and that includes in-game entertainment and how we pitch the game to new people. I think better than most, cricket gets in the way of itself sometimes. We do it this way because it works, or doesn't work, we'll still do it this way. So I think, why don't we, and we looked at it this year with broadcast, we just ran out of time. Let's have some alternate commentary. Let's get the guys like John Boy in to help us, who do a great job, crossing over baseball, explaining it. If Nicholas Poran's going nuts and hitting home runs, well, how far did Darren Judge's home run go the other night? Can we overlay that? How do we try and do that a bit different? How do we make it like an NBA game where we drop the lights for the players running in to enter? And how do we really embrace all that and actually hold our cricket and be true to the game and represent the product in the best way, not be gimmicky? But then how do we add all the other stuff so people want to come and it's an event? And I think that's what Major League Cricket can be. It does come back to venues and scaling that realistically. But yeah, I think so the other advantage money brings is our salary cap was pretty high. So we said at the start we want to attract the best players in the world. I think generally we did that. So I think if you watch highlights at any point, you've got someone steaming in, or a genuine quick, or one of the best batsmen in the world. So I think the product itself, again, was good. It looked good on broadcast. That's important. And also the fans came. It looked like fun, and it was fun. I've never had an atmosphere like that outside of India. And we don't want to be IPL marquee. I mean, everyone would love to, but it's not realistic. It doesn't work. The number of people would have come to you and said, "Oh, we're gonna recreate IPL. We're gonna do this. The money's gonna flow." It doesn't work like that. But this crowd was something. So I think we spent money on players, we spent money on stadiums, and it goes pretty quick. We've got a pretty robust plan. We've got a great set of investors, and again, you don't need to Google us too far to see some of the businessmen. It's Satya Nadella from Microsoft, who was down at the final, and all these guys. So they're all in. They're in for the long haul. They also drank the Kool-Aid. They're selling the Kool-Aid that we believe this game is great. We can make it greater, but it's complex.
Make cricket great again.
Make cricket. Don't ever say that.
I was asked a lot beforehand what success was for this league, and I said running it properly, like it existing. Yeah. Just because I've seen so many of these leagues don't even turn up, and quite often they get investment money and advertisers and it just doesn't fall in place. Let's say that this is a success. We'll both agree that this is a success as it has currently gone. What is a success for you in 5 years' time? I'm not even if you get the ask because of how bad you've been in this podcast and they fire you.
100% could happen any day now. Waiting for the call. No, it's fair. I think if we're going to grow the game, and I can sit here and pontificate all this stuff, how it's great, it's going to work. If we don't have home markets to grow, it's not. Because I'm never going to cheer for Seattle living in Texas, so I'm not going to embrace the freedom. I don't know. So I think we need to get to that, Texas were amazing here, and they leveraged the hell out of it. And they had all sorts of people come, and the flags, and that was great. And there was a real hometown feel. So we need to generate that rivalry around our initial 6 franchises. So San Fran, if they're playing in San Fran, it's a lot easier to sell this product and to show people this product. So success for me in 3 to 5 years will be having each of the teams play at home, having a home and away series, building up these rivalries. And that way I think we'll get a lot more traction in more markets, because absolutely Morrisville, North Carolina is a huge part of our plans and going forward, but they don't have a team. So, well, all the will in the world will only ever fit 3,000 people into that venue. So in terms of commercially, how do we grow that? It's not going to be there. It's obviously a place for it, and it might be playing matches there, but if we haven't got 6 bases, it's not going to work. So I think that needs to be the short to longer term goal.
Yeah, I know it's really interesting. What did you? What's your main takeaway? Because you've been working at cricket for a long time now. What's your main takeaway from having done this tournament that you probably didn't think about beforehand?
Yeah, how to turn a big screen on. I'm still trying to get that thing turned off in cheapo. No, I think anyone can run a tournament, honestly, and it's not hard. I think it's doing that while trying to keep all the. I know it's a balancing. I think it's trying to keep everyone happy at the same time, knowing that not everyone's going to be happy. So I think I learned a lot personally and professionally about boundaries, certainly, not just fours, setting them, but also working for the good of the league. Ultimately, we need to be, okay, what is good for league, what is good for cricket, and it's not always popular, and it's definitely not always sexy, and it's not the best way to spend money to get the impact. But if we don't stop and get practice facilities right, if we don't start focusing on the quality of umpires and giving them money, giving them a shot, if we don't get more curators here and learn how we source this clay better, how I find, cheaper nets, or nets, like all this sort of stuff, because the quicker we can do that consistently across the country, the better it will be. So, well, it's great for private leagues to run and players get money that way. Some of the money is stupid. That money you could put into a ground, you could put that into, and then you've actually got something you can build on. So it's changing that mindset. But the league itself, I think what I learned is you can never have enough staff. I think we're pretty understaffed for what we do, and I think while from the outside looking in, it looked amazing, and you're right, it was a success in most of the things you tick off. But I think my thing is I'd probably walk into a venue and see what we've done wrong, which is probably a bit negative, obviously sometimes, and my teammates get the shits for that, I'm sure. But it's only because I can see how great this could be with just some little things. So I think if we can start moving those little things pretty quickly, we staff this properly, we really, it's going to sound corny, but we need some kumbaya moments here shortly where all the key stakeholders come together and say, okay, well, this is happening here. We've got the backing of, big people, the ICC are involved. We're looking at, 15, 16 matches here next year as part of a World Cup, which are very, marketable. If some of the teams I'm hearing are going to come here, this is huge. This is huge. So, I think the only thing that can mess this up is ourselves, to be honest, and how do we stay out of the way of that? And that's a constant learning of, how as a team member and a manager and part of the senior leadership, we do that for another cliche, but for the good of the game, and just, how do we put cricket first and then build back around that?
Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.